Let me just start off by saying that if you pour your milk in before your cereal, you're an absolute psychopath, or you're a being from a different planet, maybe. We all know it goes cereal first, then milk. That should probably be on like the I'm not a psychopath test, you know? I don't know. I don't make up the rules. It just is what it is. Anyways, let's get serious here for a few minutes. And I know I've done this already like in 3 different videos, including this one. This is my 3rd time covering this particular topic, and I'm hoping this is my last time. Although I will say the last couple of times that I mentioned this, I kind of covered something else that was happening at the time. But today we're only talking about NECA. And just to do a quick little recap, because like I said, I talked about it originally. This is my 2nd recap, but essentially NECA did something where, and I'll take you guys back to the beginning, just like I said, a quick little brief summary in case you guys haven't kept up with the story. Essentially, NECA decides to release this really overpriced layered diorama set. This was kind of a little bit of a conversation between the community, and eventually, you know, it went up for pre-order, it sold out, or whatever the case. They got it, their orders in. And within a few months, they started to receive, or I should say, some of the collectors started to receive their purchase, right? The price point was a little bit of a talking point for a few weeks, and then people kind of forgot about it. And then it kind of became somewhat of a story eventually a few months after people, or I should say a few weeks after people started receiving the layers. What was really interesting, and by the way, this is kind of like a little off-topic conversation, but what was interesting is that when people started to receive, the customers that actually purchased the layers started to receive their diorama sets, a lot of them started to receive doubles. And I'm not talking about like maybe 5 or 6 or 10 different, I mean, potentially hundreds or thousands of customers started to receive doubles of the layer, which is really interesting because a lot of people have kind of have kind of attacked NECA because they did this whole debacle because of, you know, certain people receiving doubles, and they gave examples of like, well, when, you know, Nike sends out double pairs of shoes, they don't ask for it back. Well, it's different. You see, if let's say Nike had sent thousands of double pairs, I think maybe they would have been in the same scenario, in the same situation. So let's not be that critical about how, or I shouldn't say how they handled it, but they shouldn't be hypercritical about NECA panicking about the whole situation. Because if, like, let's say NECA or Nike, or let's say whatever it is that you're ordering, it doesn't just have to be action figures. Let's say you're ordering a t-shirt or whatever the case may be, and their profit margins are not great, then potentially maybe the OM or the manufacturer maybe handles the situation very similarly. We don't know. I mean, we're not insiders, so I don't know exactly what's happening behind the scenes. I don't know what their profit margins are, but it's just funny that nobody really took that into consideration. On top of that, when the whole, you know, debacle was happening with NECA, when people were starting to receive doubles, very few people actually talked about this on social media. They weren't going on Facebook or on Twitter and saying, hey, I got an extra layer diorama set, who wants to buy it? It wasn't like that. There were a lot of consumer, and there were some, let's be brutally honest, I do remember seeing some postings about this, but it was very far in between. I would say like maybe less than 5% of consumers that had received doubles had talked about it. Most of them kept quiet. They sold their extra dio, and then maybe like a few weeks later, they got a notice from NECA essentially saying, hey, can you guys return the item? We'll give you guys a little bit of a credit. We'll, you know, kind of smooth things over, which, again, another really interesting talking point. $100 credit for your account is insane. That makes me believe that their profit margins were really good. Like, because of the dio set being really overpriced, that tells me that the profit was just insane on this particular dio set, and they're probably going to kind of soften the blow if a lot of people do send it in, because $100 is, you know, it's pretty substantial. But if you think about it, not everybody's going to just boom purchase $100 worth of merchandise right off the bat. I think most people that bought the dio set probably are waiting on stuff in the foreseeable future, so they're probably going to use their credit within like the next year or so, or the next few months. So it really softens the hit of whatever it is that they were going to lose on this piece, because they weren't going to lose it all at once. They're going to be able to kind of smooth things over with, you know, the other consumers that hadn't purchased their dio set or hadn't received it yet. and then they were going to be able to kind of spread those $100 out throughout the next few months or potentially even years, because not everybody's going to just purchase $100 worth of merchandise right off the bat. A lot of the people that were picking up the dial set obviously were like huge diehard NECA fans. But all of that aside, you know, NECA doubled down. They essentially said, hey, if you don't, and this was I believe the second email where they essentially said, hey, if you don't send this in, we're actually going to back charge you, as well as potentially barring you from purchasing any other or any of our future releases. This was a really interesting stance to take if you're NECA. Instead of trying to smooth things over and trying to kind of like save their reputation, they essentially kind of like backhanded their entire community by doing this, because a lot of the people that were probably waiting on their layer were definitely paying attention to this, and then a lot of the people that obviously had received a second dial piece were definitely paying attention to this. And look, I'm not here to tell anybody what they should do. Personally, I do feel that NECA mishandled the entire situation, and I do feel like potentially there are going to be some huge ramifications. But at the same time, I think the consumer base really showed their true nature, because a lot of people were up in arms about like, I have to drive to the post office. I mean, like, I get it. You shouldn't have to, but there are a lot of things in the world that we shouldn't have to do, but we do it, right? Like driving to the DMV is the worst thing in the world, or going to doctor's appointments and things of that nature. But I do feel like if you did receive an extra dial piece, personally, I wouldn't have sold it. I probably would have just held on to it and see what NECA was going to do or what they were going to message me about. And then maybe if they did know about it, then it's a completely different situation. But the fact that they, like directly address the situation, I think it puts the consumers or the community on a spotlight. And it shows their true nature of really what it is that they were going to do with the extra set. A lot of people sold these things immediately, which to me raises some flags. It raises some concerns about these people's, sense of morality and their ethics. But again, I'm not here to tell people what they should do. NECA definitely mishandled the situation. And as I said before, if they had messed up on maybe 10, maybe even 20, 50, 100 dial sets, if they had sent out 100 of doubles of these in their orders, that would be one thing. But if they potentially send out hundreds or thousands of these, there could be some huge ramifications and there could be some huge losses. Now, you may think, I don't care. They're an OM. They can figure it out. They're a potentially multi-million-dollar company. Why would I care? Well, it's pretty simple. If you're a fan of that franchise, or if you're a fan of that manufacturer, you don't want it to go away. You want them to continue making action figures. And if their debacle is really as big as they're making it seem, there could be a huge domino effect here, which eventually leads to them potentially losing the TMNT license. Because I'm sure whoever owns TMNT at the moment is probably looking at this and saying, what is going on here? Why are they attacking their own consumer base? We definitely have to maybe look into this, and this potentially could lead to maybe even the downfall of NECA. Now, I'll give you guys my personal 2 cents on NECA as a whole, as a manufacturer. I'll be brutally honest with you guys. I'm not the biggest fan of them. I'll give you guys an example. If you go to your local Target or Walmart right now and you purchase one of their regular released NECA action figures, whatever the case, whether it's TMNT or their horror stuff, out the door you'll be paying about $40. Is the figure really worth $40 to me? I mean, it's kind of close, but I'll be honest with you guys, it isn't. Their articulation points are incredibly low. They don't really care about articulation, so you're not going to be able to get into crazy poses. Essentially, they give you a lot of options when it comes maybe to to a lot of the head portraits or the head sculpts. They give you some cool accessories, some extra hands, things of that nature. But in terms of displaying the figure, you're not going to really get too much out of it. The figures really can't pose. A lot of the times you're getting like single jointed elbows that can't even hit 90 degree angles, and then like absolutely no ab crunch and so on and so forth. For a $40 figure, I'm not sure if I'm ready to make that commitment. Now, if you're a huge TMNT fan, obviously I think this is like the main line. There are a few other manufacturers that may be making turtles, and I don't keep up to date with it, but I think Jazzwares had the license for a while. I'm not sure if they still do. I know Mattel has it. I know Super 7, and there are a few other OMs. I know that the new Best AXN line or whatever, which is a much smaller line, but they also own the rights to make those figures. So it's really interesting. There aren't really that many other OMs at that scale that make TMNT licensed action figures. I think, like I said, maybe Super 7 is as close to Super 7 Ultimates. So it's really interesting that NECA has taken this stance, considering they're always a fringe manufacturer. They're never like the main, they're never one of the main manufacturers out there. You go to your local Target or Walmart, there's a reason they're, you know, closer to the electronics section. It has a lot to do with the fact that they're slightly overpriced, and not everybody is collecting whatever it is that they're selling. Most of the time they're making horror action figures, which I love. I mean, I love the Friday the 13th line. I love their Nightmare on Elm Street stuff. I love their Alien stuff, even though, like I said, I don't personally jump in on them, but I love the franchises. I love the films. And when it comes down to like collectibles or merchandise as a whole, I also love it. I just don't collect it. I can't collect everything. And this is one of those OMs that I've always kind of pushed to the side, because I don't think that there's enough value there. I mean, you're talking about $40, and I know before tags it's like $37, $38, but still, that's a pretty hefty price to pay for an action figure line that has always been very limited in terms of articulation. Granted, their sculpt work is always very good. Their paint ups are solid. They always give you quite a few accessories with all of their releases. But for my taste, I always prefer all of that included with great articulation. If I'm going to sacrifice something, let's just say, I would sacrifice the accessories or an extra head sculpt for the sake of having like some extra, you know, articulation points. And that's only my personal take. Like I said, there are other people that don't really care too much about the aesthetics of the figure. There are some people that prefer articulation. There are some people that don't. They prefer the figure to have like a sleeker look or a better looking you know, body sculpt. And obviously articulation usually cuts into the body mold a little bit too much. So everybody has their own personal taste, and the NECA lines usually have a decent amount of support. But to me, this really, it's going to shine a light on the OM. And this could potentially have some really, really big ramifications. Let's not forget, they don't just have the TMNT line, but now people that don't even collect TMNT are going to pay attention. Maybe some people that only collected their horror stuff is really going to start paying attention, and they could potentially lose some of those customers. Like, they could just be so irate at the way that they handled the situation that they decide to not buy anything from them. And like I said, this could lead to potentially not only the downfall of NECA, but them losing the license to the TMNT line, which is the most important part of all of this. Let's be brutally honest. Most of the people that buy this, I should say there's a small percentage of people that will buy anything that's TMNT. If you slap a logo that's Ninja Turtles, they will buy it regardless of whether it's a good price or good value. That's just what they're into. That's just what kind of brings them a nostalgia factor that nobody can explain. But there are those that collect them because they're NECA. They are a huge fan of NECA. They think that the OM is just doing wonders for the Ninja Turtles line. So look, I'll leave it up to you guys. I personally feel like everybody kind of looks bad here, okay? The community, you know, the fact that nobody was talking about the extra layers was kind of like a little bit of a red flag for me. But at the same time, these collectors, it doesn't matter, because they're just like normies. They're just normal people in their houses doing whatever it is that they do. Moral or ethics aside, they don't run a business. They have nothing to lose aside from, you know, some people that may recognize them, like, hey, that's the guy that didn't send out the second layer. But if you didn't say anything, guess what? You're in the clear. Nobody cares, right? Like, the company or the entity here that has the most to lose has to be NECA. They mishandled the situation. Not only did they make a mistake by overpricing the layer, but then they made an even bigger mistake by sending out doubles, and then really to kind of dig their own grave, they decided to send that second email, which essentially just was very hostile towards their own consumer base. It's crazy. Why would you do that if you know that these people have supported you for years now? Regardless of all of your mistakes and all of your flaws, they were still there supporting you. They were still there prepared to hand out their money, their hard-earned money to you. And this is how you treated them. It was just kind of really interesting and just an absolutely hilarious situation from the outside looking in. I really feel for those collectors that have not yet received their layer. I'm hoping that NECA, compensates them or gives them a little bit of a refund with something extra. Maybe give them those $100 to the consumers that have been waiting now for months for their second layer. But knowing NECA and the way that they've handled the situation thus far, I highly doubt it. And look, like I said, some of the stuff is really interesting to me. I don't purchase it, but like their alien stuff, all of their horror stuff, I've always been very fascinated with. They've had some crossover stuff recently with TMNT with the Universal Monsters line, which is just brilliant stuff, which they get to reuse a lot of the body molds and a lot of the accessories while still being genuinely creative. You have a lot of like they started to release that new base, the new base renditions of a lot of these figures with no extra accessories. If you just want a Frankenstein, or if you just want a mummy or Dracula, you have the capability to do that. So they've done good things. I mean, NECA has always been a good solid OM. It's just not my personal forte, but it's just sad to see the consumer base kind of torn about this whole entire situation. But like I said, this could potentially spell the end for NECA having the TMNT line. Like if whoever owns, I'm not sure who owns the TMNT franchise, but if they look at this, there could potentially be some huge consequences. But only time will tell. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you guys enjoy this type of rambling action figure content, make sure to stay tuned. We do upload pretty consistently, like 3 to 4 different times during the week. And also let me know your thoughts down below about the entire situation. Did you guys receive seconds? Did you return them? Did you not return them? Or what's your entire take on NECA as a whole? Let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and as always, make sure to enjoy the hobby. That's the most important part of all this. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.